I would say many thanks for coming on board, obviously, to you and Jeremy. But you're the expert. You kickstart immediately. You go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks, Stelios. And nice to meet all of you. Looking forward to spending a little bit of time with you thinking about this subject of culture that Stelios and Jeremy actually also related to already a little bit in their talks. I've entitled my session Crafting a Culture for Growth. And that notion of craft, I think, is quite important. It's important to me because I do quite a bit of research in this space, and I think it's a very crucial concept to understand the challenges of operating in the 21st century as a human being when there's all sorts of opportunities to automate things and rely on robots. But that's for maybe a different moment. I think the spirit of craft is something that is also truly reflective of these programs that we run and how Jeremy and Stelios think, right? So as Jeremy, I think, also alluded to already, the things that we're doing here cannot just be solved by plain science. Right, it really requires a combination between theory and practice. So, and that's very much the spirit that Stelios and Jeremy also harness in these kinds of sessions. So that's one. The second one means that this requires deep human engagement with crucial issues that, again, as Jeremy also said, things that we cannot solve for you. Right. So we are going to help you. We're going to ask you difficult questions. We're going to provide you frameworks, but it requires a commitment from you to do the hard work. So also in this session, I want to call on you. I'm going to run a breakout room in a little bit to show you the power of interacting with each other on these important, but sometimes a bit of ambiguous and challenging subjects. And there's also a notion of trust there, right? I know not all of us are able to have the videos on, which is fine. I don't want that to constrain our interaction. So I'm going to expose myself a little bit potentially to risk here, but please be prepared in a little bit. Halfway through the session, we're going to put you in breakout rooms to see if we can actually also harness this, extremely valuable opportunity that we have here is to learn from each other, right? Jeremy touched again on that a little bit as well. Sometimes an outsider perspective can really help you get to the essence of your points. And that's extremely important, I think, for the notion of culture as well. All right. Now, I'd actually like to hear from you already at this stage. So when we're talking about culture, what sort of things are on your mind that are relevant to your business as you're thinking about growth or current issues? What are some challenges or issues or things that you're working on that relate to this subject? I'm very curious to hear. Who likes to volunteer a perspective?
Can I volunteer here? It's a different Jeremy here. The culture, and I think we sort of, dare I say, taking it more and more seriously. It's when it didn't work out, getting more people on board, recruitment. When it did not, that was our biggest sort of red flag to say, okay, we need to take this much more seriously. So from a recruitment people point of view, and then things not working out, that was our, dare I say, truth moment to say we need to take this very seriously. So
clearly, right? So you find out the hard way that you've maybe onboarded people with the wrong mindsets, and that's oftentimes because you're unclear about what it is that you're really about, right? So you're not broadcasting the right messages or not selecting appropriately. Vario also said, right, mindsets in general clearly relate to that. Looking after your employees, very important, right? There's a performance component to this. Do we have the right culture to perform? In a narrow sense, in a technical way, but there's a broader sense around it as well, right? So it also makes sure that you want to have your employees be happy, looked after potentially, and aligned with the organization. The ethics of teamwork clearly is something you can be thinking about. Jörg, you were off mute. You wanted to contribute?
Yes, please. Thanks very much. I would like to echo what Jeremy just said. And I would go a little bit further. I mean, I work in a fantastic team of people which we recruited, and as the whole session here is about growth, I noticed that growth process obviously requires a different set. I wouldn't say a different set of people. That would be very. I would say that would be dangerous to say, because I don't want to lose the good people which I have, but it requires a different mindset. And we are a high-tech company. We have developed technology from scratch, but we try to put this into the marketplace, and we have some sex with this. People knocking at our doors, and they want to have things. Now suddenly we're going from a very scientific type of work into a more commercial work, and I understand some of my people really struggle in getting this changed. Reports are shorter. We are not going too deep into things anymore, this mindset is extremely difficult to change, and I experience a lot of resistance in that. Funny is, I went through that same process myself many years ago. I understand what these people say, so that's a good thing. But it is really challenging.
No, absolutely, right. And we'll touch on that. It is a big problem. We won't be able to solve it in 50 minutes or so, but we'll definitely touch on this. It actually also relates to Claire, who's citing some academic research here, actually, by referring to the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. So the first part is, what can we do to enable, right, the people in our organization to make that transition? So what kind of context can we provide as an organization to have that mindset change occur naturally, rather than impose it or force it on people with potentially unintended consequences, right? And this is a difficult process. What would I like to do now in the next little bit? Basically touch on two things. One is this issue of cultural failures. So Jeremy touched upon that as well. It relates to many of the issues you describe here. And then I finally want to end with briefly introducing a framework, the cultural web, that I usually use in these sessions to help you think about diagnosing your culture, what it is that we have today, where are potentially gaps, and then also thinking about what you can do to change or fix something. Right? How can you embed a growth mindset? What are the places where you can start thinking about? And one key thing that I say right up front is that these things are hard, especially when you're at the stages that you are. You're preparing to grow potentially. You're maybe still a small size team. There's so much stuff hitting you. You say, well, we postpone this stuff. We postpone it for later. We'll figure it out later on, right? This doesn't seem crucial right now. That is a very problematic attitude to have to these things, right? These things, culture forms regardless of what you do. If you don't attend to them early on, you'll find yourself with something that becomes very difficult to fix later on, right? So it's crucial that you engage with these issues. So cultural failures. I'm going to symbolize two typical cultural failures that we want to avoid. And I'm going to symbolize them with what I call the O-ring problem and the banana problem. Right? The bigger point here that I just tried to make is summarized quite nicely in this famous quote that you may have come across. Right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, operational excellence for lunch, and everything else for dinner. Right? We can make all these nice plans. We can think of all the great ways that we will become more efficient, right? Or have excellent processes in place. But if we don't make sure the culture is aligned, right, we're going to fail. And actually, Jeremy had Ford examples. This quote has actually been traced back to Mark Fields, who was CEO of Ford a while back. Right? So Ford is relevant here. Now, if you don't attend to culture properly, you may get this, right? You find yourself unable to execute the things you want to do because there is this sort of invisible 80-pound gorilla somewhere sitting in your organization that seems to hold everyone back. Right? This is what we want to prevent, right? We want a benign gorilla that actually empowers your organization, your people to do the right thing. So from a more extreme cultural perspective, you could argue this, right? So Edward Schein, famous cultural theorist, he said, the only real thing of importance that leaders do is create and manage the culture. You need to keep it in the back of your minds. Almost anything that you do as a leader ultimately reflects on the culture and has an impact on the culture. Right? So it's absolutely crucial. Common problems. The first one I would introduce here is this problem of cultural drift that I'm going to symbolize with the O-ring problem. Here we have a picture of a disastrous event from a while back. Luckily, we haven't seen that recently. This is the Challenger launch disaster from 1989, if I'm not mistaken. Anybody familiar with this event? It's a while back. Who has some idea what happened here?
Yes, I know a little bit about that. It has been also expressed in Richard Feynman's book.
Yeah, sure. I see also that Peter is off mute. Sorry, Peter, did you want to engage?
Yeah, no, that's right. I'm familiar with that. Yep.
What happened?
From what I recall, the O-rings were designed for a set temperature range, and the morning of the launch, it was a particularly cold morning, and they didn't activate in the way that they should have done from an engineering perspective, and that led to the catastrophic failure that you can see on the screen.
Excellent technical summary. But now there's a context behind this stuff, right? Because you look at this and you say, how is it possible that this happened at an organization like NASA, right? Known for its, top of the line engineering skills. Safety is clearly the first thing they think about. They do test after test after test to rule these kinds of incidents out. Something had gone, really wrong here. And there's a commission that was put in charge of figuring out what happened, Rogers Commission. And actually, the first thing they said when they came back, this was a cultural problem, right? Something had happened in the organization where they had a safety protocol, safety culture, whatever you want to call it. And over time, mindset started to drift in a way that no one really noticed, a bit like the boiling frog kind of process, right? And they found themselves ultimately making decisions that, if you looked at them closely, were completely in violation of their own safety principles. What actually was happening, they had tests done on these O-rings at many instances, and nothing went royally wrong during these tests, but there were indications that these O-rings were potentially not as strong as they should have been, right? Yet managers went on with this decision to launch anyway, and then there was an extreme temperature event that ultimately caused this. This shows you what can happen when an organization starts to focus too extremely on short-term performance. NASA came off the back of successful Apollo missions and started to set themselves targets. Stelios talked about the issue of just setting targets. Targets a number of launches done per year, cost related as well. They wanted to make space travel more ubiquitous, right? So over time, this started to erode their safety culture. No one really noticed it until this was too late. This is what you want to prevent, right? You don't want the equivalent of the Challenger disaster happening to your organization. So it requires attention. So when confronted with performance pressures, which we often have when we're trying to grow, organizations may become gradually more comfortable with risk-taking in a very broad sense. And if left unchecked, this can have disastrous consequences. So this O-ring stands for the aspects of the organization where beneficial constraints can be eroded if you don't attend to them, right? In this case, NASA safety culture. So there's one problem, this cultural drift. The second one is a little bit of the reverse. And some of you actually talked about this in the opening bit, right? This is an issue of cultural inertia. And also Jeremy talking about all these things that are taken for granted within your organization. This relates to that, right? So there's stuff that sticks in your organization that may prevent you from realizing something. Let me symbolize that with this story. And I'm going to symbolize it with what I'm going to call as the banana problem. This is a story of an experiment done a long time ago, 1950s. And they had a cage, and they had in the cage a ladder. And on top of the ladder, there were a bunch of bananas. Now they introduce a monkey in this cage. And as you may expect, the monkey sees the bananas, goes for the reward, goes right up the ladder. But unbeknownst to the monkey, there's a water cannon. As soon as the monkey reaches the top flight, the water cannon goes off and the monkey is blasted away. Monkey tries this a few times, but keeps failing and eventually gives up. Now a second monkey is introduced. Paul Chaplin, what do you think is going to happen? What is the monkey going to do? The second monkey.
I think the second monkey will try and do what the first monkey did, not realizing the consequences.
And what's going to happen next?
Well, when the second monkey's been blown off, they might wait for the third monkey to turn up, or they might decide to work as a pair.
No, if this were an organization, the first monkey will make sure that the second monkey is not going up the stairs. This first monkey is like, I'm not going to experience a negative event, right? So actually, violently, he will prevent the second monkey from going from the stairs. Not pretty, right? Now they introduce a third monkey. Same thing happens. Fourth monkey, fifth monkey. We now have 4 pre-existing monkeys preventing the fifth monkey from going for the bananas, right? Very powerful. Now something interesting happens. They replace the first monkey with a new monkey. Now, none of the monkeys have experienced a negative event. Right? For all they know, the water cannon could be dysfunctioning now, turned off. You can easily go to the bananas. Yet none of the monkeys will go for the bananas. If you had somehow been able to talk to them, you would ask them, why are you not going for the bananas? They would have said, I don't know. It's just the way we do things around here. This is culture in a negative sense, right? When you become a nerd, stuff gets passed on, gets socialized in the next generation. You come into a new atmosphere, you look around you for cues, oftentimes negatively reinforced, and you find yourself missing certain opportunities because of traumas of the past, for instance. Right? So the banana problem is this notion that over time organizations tend to become resistant to change. We have these ways of doing things, right? And the banana stands for this opportunity for improvement that we realize, or maybe struggle to realize as a result, right? We need to figure out do we have any bananas, right? That we have processes or aspects of our culture that are sitting in the way. All right. Let me make these examples again more clear by another case. So I do a lot of work for large global banks, financial service industry more broadly, and culture is a very important topic in that sector these days, right? So massive issues with cultural drift in the past. These organizations grew, beyond what you can even imagine within time spans of like 7 years. And even though these organizations were relatively, balanced in terms of risk attitudes and mindsets, the growth mindset, the short-termism took over very quickly with disastrous consequences. Classic example of cultural drift. Now we're trying to fix this, and we're realizing that culture is actually important, was previously neglected. We're dealing with issues of inertia. On the one hand, we find that, especially in the middle of the organization, we still have these typical financial or, pre-crisis, pre-financial crash types of mindsets that are focused purely on financial incentives. So they're very difficult to weed out. And on the other hand, we have this ingrained mindset as well that everybody on the business side must be a criminal. Bankers are criminals. And if we bring in people in compliance, they're going to do whatever they can to make people on the business side, their lives difficult to grow, right? So there's all these inertial pressures in the banking system now that are making it very difficult to function. Cultural design, cultural change is extremely important to fix these things. Good. Are these problems clear? So we have a cultural drift problem, or you may face cultural inertia problems that you want to be thinking about. Any questions on those? Happy? All right, that was my cue, or I guess was you cue that I'm going to force you to engage with it now, right? So you better be sure you're clear. So here we're gonna see what happens. I'm gonna put you in a breakout space. We're gonna mix you up a little bit, and I'd like you to first attend to which groups you're in. So groups 1, 2, 3, you'll see it in your Zoom. We'll discuss an O-ring problem. Remember, problem of cultural drift. Groups 4 to 6 will discuss a banana problem of cultural inertia. Yeah. I would like you as a group, please, take the initiative, come up with contributions. As a group, come up with at least one concrete example of your assigned problem. It would be great if it can somehow come from your own organizations. If not, discuss another well-known case that you know a little bit about. And then the first important question of substance is, and the only one, how would you go about fixing this stuff, right? If you were confronted with a problem like this, where would you even start? What are the things that are on your mind? Ideally, you have a spokesperson nominated that can share this back with the group when we come back. Is this clear, the exercise? Yes? Okay, good. Then I'm going to send you off to the breakout rooms now. I'll jump around to some of their groups as well to see how you're getting on. We take about 10 minutes for this. And the cultural web is a framework designed by Jerry Johnson and colleagues. And it looks like this. It starts like this. The idea is here that we want to have something, a cultural conception, that's the hard part, that we want to embed in the organization. What is it that we care about, that we need to have, right? That will align with our strategy or our growth targets, that is ultimately driving our value. And it could be, we want to make sure that all employees ultimately belong and feel heard. Could be that. Could be something else entirely, right? This is up to you to figure out, right? And part of the exercise will be that. That's already hard enough. But whatever cultural conception is that you want to embed, whether it's a broader purpose, whether it's a set of values, right? The how that Stelios talked about, guiding principles, or just this idea, the way we do things around here, it needs to change. This is what goes in the heart. Then after formulating that, which a lot of organizations can do, and we have all these, vision, mission, values, we put it on a website. The difficult part is, where do you embed this in the organization, right? This is a broader issue that also relates to more the narrow idea of operationalization of targets and all that kind of things. But from a cultural perspective, there's a lot of things that you need to think of here, right? So oftentimes we think first on control systems that we need to attend to, right? So how are we incentivizing our employees? How are we observing cost effectiveness? How are we making decisions on performance evaluation, right? There's a whole range of things that go in here. And if we don't attend to how those things ultimately shape the culture more broadly, we're going to risk facing unintended consequences. Oftentimes, these systems get designed from a relatively rational perspective, right? We need a solution, or we need to be efficient, or we need to hit a target. But these systems have a deep influence on the culture. So that's the first place to look. And some of the groups I know, Michelle mentioned this, you were looking here. How are we actually incentivizing our people? Is it actually aligned with what we want to achieve? Obvious one. Now you go further, and there's other things in the organization, right? Are we structured properly, right? Many organizations, when they grow, they naturally see silos forming around departments, right? Which has an impact on your culture, right? They see a hierarchy forming, which has an impact on your culture, right? Is this what we want, or is there something we can do about it? Then we have rituals and routines, right? How do we do our meetings? How do we do onboarding? How are we approaching our clients? All these things we tend to, from a rational perspective, oftentimes streamline, we make them more efficient. And if we don't attend to them, they all start driving towards more short-term targets, but they have a fundamental impact on your culture. And that could have long-term disastrous consequences if you don't attend to them. Now, these are the formal things of the organization. And getting there and making sure that's aligned with what you culturally want to embed is already hard enough. But then there's a whole informal side that also requires attention, right? Organizations are mini societies, right? So there's naturally these informal power structures. In tech startups, engineers, no matter what the formal structure is, they tend to have quite a lot of power because their skills are scarce. Is that having any unintended consequences on the culture, right? Are they inadvertently, prioritizing their mindset over something else that we want to have, potentially? Right? The stories that we tell are also very powerful, right? In some ways, strategy is just an elaborate form of storytelling. It says something about who we are as an organization, where we want to go, where we think the problems are. This is so important and so powerful. And it's a craft, right? To be able to do this properly as a leader, especially as you grow as an organization, having authentic stories that can bind people requires a lot of attention. And then finally, there's a bucket that is all the intangible stuff, right? Stellius talked about it as well, that matter, that have symbolic value, right? The job titles you use, or you give awards to people for certain achievements. They give a signal, right? So all these things are places where your culture touches on something manifest in the organization, right? Where you can see, hey, this is misaligned, there may be a problem, but also right away that provides you with an opportunity for doing something about it, right? For embedding the right mindset, to making sure the context is there. So we do have, say, the growth mindset that we want to achieve. All right. That's me whizzing you through this framework that clearly requires a lot more attention, a lot more work to put to proper work. But I did want to give you something nice and positive as well, a framework that you could ultimately use. And I'd love to work with you more on that. That brings me to the end of my part, right? So there were basically two objectives. I wanted you to think about what can go wrong if you don't attend to culture properly. And then I want you to take away at least just of a framework that I tend to use to structure exercises and help you as a company. I very much enjoyed the short interaction with you. I hope to engage with you again in the future. And I'd like to give the floor to Stellius now and Andrew, who are going to wrap up the program, I take it.
Thanks. Thank you, Jochem. I'll pass it on very quickly to Andrew. I mean, it's a privilege that you guys have dedicated 3 hours of your time on a valuable Friday morning to stay with us. So the only thing I can say is kudos and many thanks for spending the time. We hope that you saw three things. First, you got a little bit of a taster, which was the original perception, right? What are we offering and why we offer it, and what's the spirit behind what we do? And hopefully you saw value there. Second is you got three interesting tools away, three interesting perspectives, ways of thinking, frameworks that I think are extremely applicable, and you can readily use them and try to structure your thinking along those lines. And something that you haven't yet gotten, but it's available and you can get it. And a few of you have signed up for this, but a few more might want to actually consider it, is the much more bespoke discussion that you can have with one of our coaches. In this particular case is Andrew, who just came live on his camera. and he's going to take over from me in just a few seconds, and see how also the coaching component works in this particular program. So one thing is the tools, is the frameworks, is the way we sort of introduce topics informed by, as you saw also with Jochem and Jeremy, by the literature and by interesting case studies out there that we have been recording, but fully taking those concepts on board and applying them, implementing them in the practical realities of your relative organizations cannot happen unless there is this extra piece of ongoing discussion that's going to be happening on a much closer circle and the circle of trust, in a sense, with the coach within the program. So having said those, I'll turn the attention to you, Andrew, for closing up with any detail that we can offer along those lines. And hopefully those of you who signed up to discuss with Andrew in the afternoon, you will enjoy it and you will see even more value coming out of this discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thanks very much, Stelios. So yes, I'm Andrew Hatch. I'm one of the coaches on the growth program. So I come along to sort of explain a bit about the structure of it, if you are interested to learn more about it. Essentially, the growth program, it's been running for, I think, 5 years. I think Stelios will probably correct me if I'm wrong. It's structured in a series of 6 workshops delivered over in 3 two-day modules over about 3 months. The idea is we kind of bring together the academic expertise you've been hearing a sort of taste of this morning. And as Stelios said very clearly, the idea is then we match that with a coach like me, who has been through a growth process or more than one in many cases, and who can understand the challenges that you have as the company operators to understand and implement that theory appropriately within your context. So we work with you to understand your context and to make sure that we can get the most out of that academic framework and the input, so that you can ultimately, the idea is that you then build a growth program that is relevant to you, and it's not some sort of standard thing. It's very much written with your own context in mind, your own current situation, and your own future goals. So by the end of that 3-month program, hopefully there will be a plan that you can implement, but also communicate to everyone in your own organization that needs to be part of that program. And there were a couple of questions about how does strategy get made. This is how we go about doing it. The next module runs in September, starting September, October, November. God willing and all that, whoever your God might be, I think we will be face to face, but yet to be completely confirmed. We hope so. We've had enough of doing this all online, so hopefully it will be face to face interaction, which will be a new experience for almost everyone on the call. I've forgotten about what it's like to be face to face. It's definitely aimed at companies who are in this position, who are trying to grow. They have an established business, and they are trying to grow it out. And I guess we're all challenged by post-COVID and potentially Brexit issues. So a lot of that will be factored in. And the idea is that you come along, you're part of a cohort. That cohort will basically be a bunch of different companies who are all experiencing the same challenges. And you commune with your cohort, the other members in the cohort, with the coach, and obviously with the academics. So here's the links at the bottom. There's a QR code if you want to look at the website. There's a link there, short link to the website. But if you have any questions, then please contact us at this email, sbg@jbs.cam.ac.uk. And I think Gemma and Sophia have been saying, if anybody want to have a wider discussion about any of this, about the coaching, about the program, then there's some slots available this afternoon from about 2 o'clock. I think some of them have been taken up, but if there's a couple left, then please sign up for them. And I'm very happy to tell you about the program, but also happy to sort of give you some instant insight on any problems you might have. I think that's all I have to say. I think, Stelios, are we at the end?
Yes, I think we are at the end. Let me just open for one last time the floor for any questions that might be pertinent. If that is not the case, then once more, I will gracefully thank every single one of you for your stamina and your engagement throughout the process. We do hope that you have gotten a sense, a taster of what the Judge Business School and the Entrepreneurship Center at the Judge Business School is offering along the lines of growth. We'll be happy to see you engaging with us. in possible future capacities. And unless there is any other question, I'd like to thank you once more and hope to see you in the future.